Distinguished panelists, sisters and brothers. When I was coming to the dais, I have met with 27 young children. Not two young children, but youth, full of excitement, full of enthusiasm. I think they are still standing somewhere in the corner. And they were so straight, they stopped me and asked, could you please tell us how we can involve in eradication of child labor? I said that, let me finish this panel, and I'll spend a lot of time with you. I wanted to acknowledge the presence of these 27 youth coming from all across Brazil and participating in this conference. Sisters and brothers, I have mixed feeling. I am happy and I am angry too. I am happy because since yesterday I have been meeting some of my very old friends who participated in the global march against child labor in 1998, which went across 80,000 kilometers in 100 countries, 103 countries in fact. And I met them after 15, 16 years. They were still very young, very energetic. And I was talking to one of my trade union friends from Latin America. Why are you so young? She said that I don't want to be old until we defeat child labor. And that's true. I'm also happy that this historic conference is being organized here. And a developing nation has shown its leadership in the fight against child labor, Brazil. This gives a very strong and clear signal to the rest of the world that now, not only the emerging economies, but the less income countries are going to take the rein and going to sit on the driving seat to end child labor. They are going to show their leadership now. It's also a signal that this event is going to begin a new era of South-South cooperation. And that is very, very important. That's why I'm happy. I know I could feel the leadership in Brazilian society 17 years ago when I came for the preparation of the Global March and met then Brazilian governor, Cristóvão Barak, who we can say the father of Bolsa Escola, or to be more gender sensitive, I will call the mother of Bolsa Escola. I had traveled across the country with my very dear friend and brother, Lelio, who is now Minister Lelio Bentes Correa. And I was with the young children. I still recall the chants and energy of the young boy, Belicio, and his sister, Belucia. On the streets of São Paulo, when we started the march, they were chanting, "No more child labor. We want books, we want toys, no more tools in tiny hands." I still recall that energy, which gives me power. I share the joy since morning that the number of child labor has been reduced significantly for the last 20 years or so. We have count for the last 10 years, but it has been reducing. And I know many of you personally that it is a personal accomplishment for many of you. because you have been fighting out in your own way, in your own capacities. I am also one of them. But personally speaking, whenever I get a report of reduction of child labor, now after 4 years, each 4 years, it heals my wounds and my injuries which I have got several times while rescuing slave children in my country, India. It heals me. So it's very personal. Friends, I'm also happy that the number of out-of-school children have also been reduced from 113 million to 57 million now in last 10 years or so. Great accomplishment. When I started my fight against child labor, nobody was prepared to listen. I have to go to the villages, talk to the people, talk to the government officials, and they assume that it's a part of life. It is nothing new. Children have to work because they are poor. And that was the case in many countries, most countries, I would say. But today, I underline, no country, no society, no business can ignore the menace of child labor. It's an issue which has to be dealt with the sense of emergency. Sisters and brothers, it's not just numbers. Every number has a face, has a name, and every child matters. Madam Minister from Netherlands, in the last conference, there was a young boy who shared the dais with Her Highness the Queen of Netherlands in the closing ceremony, Kinshu from India. And he shared his dream to the conference, and he said that I wanted to become an engineer one day. He was a car cleaner. My organization has rescued him at early age. And when I asked him that day when he was rescued, I asked, what do you want to become? He said, I am a car cleaner. I wanted to become a driver. I said, why not a mechanical engineer? And when he was sharing dice with the Queen, he said that he wanted to become a mechanical engineer. And let me tell you that last month, Kinshu has got admitted in a reputed engineering university in India. He sends his regard to all of you. When I was going here, he said, send my regards. But he also had a question, which I'm straight putting to you. He said, I could be given a dream, and I am going to make my dream come true. But who is going to give the dream and make them come true to 168 million children? And when it would be done? This is the question to you, my friends. This is a question to all of us. And we have to answer it in action. Now, as the topic suggests about challenges, I think that the number of out-of-school children and the number of child laborers have narrowed down to hard to reach or harder to reach, or some, we can say hardest to reach. There was nothing simple, but definitely if we compare, there were possibilities that children could be withdrawn from child labor and brought to schools, and that has been done, it's being done. But now our march is tougher, and even more tougher when we talk of the worst forms of child labor. We have to identify what we have been able to achieve and what are the challenges. Why I say this is tougher and what makes me angry. About a month ago, me and my colleagues from my Indian organization, Bachpan Bachao Andolan, have rescued a 15-year-old girl from domestic help. She was trafficked and held in bonded labor, slavery. She was never paid anything, forced to work in virtual invisible servitude. Somehow her father came to know about her whereabouts, and he traveled all the way from northeast of India to Delhi. We helped her rescue. And I was very surprised, rather pained to see that the father, who was so emotional, so moved, he wanted to go and hug the daughter after 4 years of separation. But the girl did not want to go close to her father. Somehow, we brought her out. Police was with us, magistrate was with us. But later on, we discovered that the girl was pregnant and has been raped several times. And in Indian society, it's a big taboo to become pregnant at such an early age without marriage. She cried that she said that I am looking for an opportunity to commit suicide because I don't want to face my relatives and friends back home. I have met number of girls and boys in Bangladesh who make garments, but can never have dreamed to wear those garments which they produced for big brands, multinational companies. I come across my children from India and Pakistan. They stitch footballs. And sometimes when we rescue them, a child says that my only dream is to play with a football one day. I was in Ivory Coast recently, a few months ago, and I have been to a very remote village, very, very remote village. I have to drive motorbike and go to talk to the cocoa growing community. And when I was talking to young boys and girls, they grow cocoa for the big chocolate companies. And none of them have ever tasted chocolate. That makes me angry. That makes me angry. And I wanted to see this anger in each one of you. We are fighting against a human right. We are fighting against an injustice. We are fighting to establish the new culture in our world, where the children are respected. Friends, we have achieved. We have seen that wherever the laws are in place and properly enforced, wherever education, quality, free education is delivered, wherever the unionized workers have been able to achieve decent working conditions, decent work, wherever where the civil society, NGOs have been vigilant and active and innovative, the places where the employers or the businesses have been able to follow the corporate social accountability and their responsibility, where the consumers have been very strong, where the social protection programs have been in place, where the rehabilitation programs for children were working, we have seen the products and progress. We have seen the reduction of child labor. These good stories, success stories, have to be properly documented and have to be disseminated and shared. How we can multiply this success in coming years? Whatever we have achieved so far, how we can multiply this has to be done. But on the other hand, we have to be honest. We have to be honest towards our children. Why things have not moved so far? We have made a commitment that by 2016 we are going to eradicate the worst forms of child labor. That was the minimal commitment for me. It goes 1 year ahead than what we have committed for education and poverty reduction and so many other things in Millennium Development Goals. But the new report, unfortunately, indicates that the present pace is not going to eliminate even the worst forms of child labor by 2016. We know that poverty is not the only reason. It has been said by the minister. It has been said by Guy this morning. So what are the reasons? What are the challenges? And whatever success we have gained so far, how to preserve it and how to multiply it, we have to identify the existing challenges or maybe the future challenges. But friends, I would call them emergencies. They are not simply challenges. I could identify 6 emergencies they have to be addressed right now with utmost priority and political will. Social action. The first, let me also tell you that these emergencies are cause and consequences of child labor, and somehow they are also interrelated, interwoven. But even then, we have to identify them independently. The first one is education emergency. The second one, employment emergency. The third is enforcement emergency. Economic emergency. Ecological emergency. And finally, the ethical emergency. Let me explain briefly. To begin with, the education emergency. 57 million children who are out of school today, they are of primary age children. If we add up the lower secondary age children, the number comes to 132 million. These children have to be in school. We know education is the key to human development, prosperity of individuals, sustainable economic growth of the countries, protection of human rights, social justice, and so on. But these 57 million children are harder to reach. Even if we open up the schools, we hire the teachers, which is unfortunately not the case. We have to hire like 18 million teachers worldwide over the 10 years' time. But these children are not going to come to school on their own until and unless very rigorous efforts are made to withdraw them from those difficult situations. We cannot solve the problem of education without elimination of child labor. As thanks to Guy, who was mentioning my quote this morning in his speech, and I have been saying to everyone that elimination of child labor or eradication of child labor and education for all are the two sides of same coin. We cannot achieve one without other. We have to work hard in achieving both. What we need? To hire teachers, to train teachers, $18 billion annually. What is this $18 billion? Friends, 3.5 days of our global military expenditure. One-fourth of what the Europeans spent on cosmetics, or 1/5 what the North Americans spent on their tobacco. It's not a huge amount. Are we so meager? Are we so poor? Are we so vulnerable that we cannot take out the guns and tools from the tiny hands of these children and give them books with these $18 billion? We have the poverty of will and the poverty of moral values towards our children and responsibility towards our children. Otherwise, we are not so poor. Forgive me to say very clearly this. Friends, the second important area is the employment emergency. We all face the aftermath of global economic crisis. Even the rich countries are facing this, the problem of sudden increase in unemployment. I'm not going to number the countries, but everywhere. We have also seen the aftermath in the emerging economies where the growth rate has fallen down suddenly. We have also noticed that how the food prices are growing high, how the health is becoming so expensive for the poor people, and all these cumulate, the cumulative effect of all these to push children to child labor in poor families. And we have to fight with that. But we must not forget that investment in education, vis-a-vis elimination of child labor, is the best investment we can make to mitigate the global economic crisis. There is a study which has been recently finished in 50 countries. Some of you might be aware that every single year of schooling for children helps in an increase of 0.3% of GDP. There's another study which proves that no country can maintain sustainable economic or speedy economic growth until and unless 40% of its population is able to read and write. One single year of schooling, primary schooling I would say, helps an increase of 5 to 15% of income in the later stage of life for a person. And in case of secondary schooling, one single year of secondary schooling helps in increase of 15 to 25% of income. Education helps in mitigating economic crisis and poverty. So that has to be there. Employment is a major issue. It's true. But these two things are interlinked. We see the outburst of youth anger in a number of countries, particularly in Arab Spring, with positive motives. But it carries on. The civil unrest goes on. For me, I think that we have not been able to give the hopes, protection, the future direction, and objective of life to our young people. And that begins with investment on children. We were not able to do it, and we failed. If we have invested, and if we can invest now on youth and children, particularly the youth between the 14 and 18 years of age, we have to ensure empowerment. We have to inculcate empowerment in them, employability, entrepreneurship, and the future hope. And that will help in creation of new jobs, more skilled jobs. And that is must. And another fact, we know that 168 million children are in full-time jobs. But the rough global estimate of unemployed people is about 200 million. And we have to look at the vicious circle, that on one hand, the parents of these children remain jobless because they are the cheap labor or free labor. They don't challenge, they don't form the unions, they could not go to the court of law. It goes on. So we have to break this vicious circle. As far as the enforcement is concerned, let me also briefly talk on it. We are happy that 177 countries have ratified ILO Convention 182 on worst forms and 166 on minimum age. 166 countries. Most of our countries have laws related to child labor, definitely laws dealing with worst forms of child labor, like slavery, hazardous labor, etc., trafficking. But I would underline here that we are very meager in enforcement of these laws. Take the case of 85 million children who are in worst forms of child labor. And for me, every single worst forms of child labor is violence against children, is crime against children. It cannot find a place in any civilized society. And in case of 85 million children, how many prosecutions we have? How many cases are registered? How many prosecutions? How many convictions? Very less number of cases go to the court. Even the civil society tried to find, let me be a little harsh to my friends, my colleagues, that we try to avoid to go to harder approach to go to the court of law. We want, even in cases of slavery and bonded labor and trafficking, we try to find softer approach. It's a crime. We have to deal with the criminal justice system. That is not done. So the number of prosecutions are very minimal and number of convictions are negligible. It needs overhauling of our enforcement mechanisms and systems. We have to have speedy trial systems. We have to have more empowered, more the inspection systems with bigger capacity and knowledge and so on. But also when it comes to the enforcement of the policies and programs, including the rehabilitation programs, social protection programs for children, sometimes we fail. Programs are there in place, but sometimes corruption is a big obstacle, or other times the lack of social or political will is an obstacle. So enforcement is very, very important thing, and that has to be dealt as an emergency. The ecological issue is a serious issue. We all know that climate change is creating tremendous problems. The disasters which are coming are not really natural disasters or godly or divine disasters. They are man-made disasters, most of us know. And these man-made disasters are responsible for loss of livelihood of indigenous people. They are forcing the poor people to displaced from their native lands and to go in search of jobs and become slum dwellers, and their children become bonded laborers, child laborers, domestic helpers. We have to deal it with an emergency. The disaster management systems have to be trained and geared up in such a way which are child-friendly. The people who are dealing with disasters management, they have to be trained in such a way that how to keep the children in top priority. And the last emergency I pointed out is ethical emergency. We keep on making promises to our children. We pledge heavens for them. And we break those promises easily. Because these children are not going to come to ask us and holding us accountable. It's the question of your moral accountability. These poor children who are working in mines and factories and farms, they are not going to come, especially the agriculture child labor. 60% of the children working in agricultural labor. In many countries, we don't have adequate laws. It is not given as the priority in the hazardous list of laws. But we must know that the nature of agriculture is completely changed. The big companies are operating now. Pesticides, chemicals, electricity, machines are being handled by young children. But we don't reach to those hard-to-reach children who are working in agriculture. So is in the case of domestic help. 11.5 million girls and boys are engaged in, mostly girls are engaged in domestic servitude. Where is our moral responsibility? We can make laws, we can try to improve our economies, we can make enforcement mechanisms in place, but everything will work when we feel morally responsible for our children. the decline in values, human values, the decline in our virtues, decline in our morality is directly affecting the non-implementation of most of these promises which we make to our children. And for me, actually, hypocrisy towards the children is the biggest sin. We have to be very plain and clear with them. Why we make the thing so complicated? Children means simplicity. We have to look for the simplest possible analysis of the problems and simplest possible solutions while knowing the biggest challenges, as I mentioned. My dear friends, today I would call upon you. When we leave from this place, this piece of paper, which will come out as the outcome document of Brasilia, should be, dear ministers and dear sisters, brothers, must be proclamation of war. The war against child labor. War against child labor. And the war against child labor cannot be won without building a strong global movement, which has been the mandate of ILO. I'm not saying something new. It is already there on paper. It has been decided. We have to build a strong worldwide movement. We have to get out of our petty interest and our egos to build such a movement. And that has to be well-resourced, that has to be coherent, that has to be strong and honest. I would rather appeal to the Secretary General of United Nations to find a way where the UN agencies' heads could come together and jointly send a message to the world that child labor is unacceptable. I don't see any chance where at the top level the heads of various UN agencies come together to discuss about the issues of children, pertaining to children. They are doing wonderful work, but more interagency cooperation and collaboration at the highest level is needed, more cohesive effort. We have failed in achieving Millennium Development Goals, MDGs. The people like me have been knocking every single door in the governments and United Nations for many years, I tell you, that please see that child labor is a cross-cutting issue and the biggest obstacle in achieving half of the MDGs. Education is definitely one of them. Okay? But today, when the world is talking more on post-2015 agenda, I would make an earnest and humble appeal to all of you that please do your best that eradication of child labor and education for all have to be brought into the agenda of 2015 development, post-2015 development. And that we have to demand unitedly, together. Finally, friends, I would also call upon ILO, who has demonstrated leadership in this field, to launch a global leaders initiative. Because what we lack is a concerted global political will. And why not we identify the leaders from various countries, the presidents, the prime ministers, or the former president, prime ministers, from unions, from employers, from civil society organizations, a global leadership initiative against child labor to generate political will. And I would also call upon the Brazilian government to take leadership in that regard, along with ILO, to form such a strong global coalition of leaders, which is needed. I would say that you are the leaders. You are the leaders. There is a leader inside you. When it comes to your own sibling, your child, your own grandchild, on your own sisters and brothers, you become a guide, you become a savior, you become a teacher. You show your leadership and prove your leadership. So the leader is in you. Once again, I call upon you and your souls and spirit that take out your leadership, take out your leader from within, and prove that this is the last generation which has seen child labor. Future generation will not see child labor on this earth. The world would be free of child labor and exploitation. Every child would be educated and receiving the best quality education and fullest of her childhood and human rights. In our lifetime, before we die, we have to achieve it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Senhoras e senhores, informamos que estão presentes nesta conferência 27 adolescentes, de cada um dos estados brasileiros e do Distrito Federal, representando e dialogando em tempo real com os adolescentes de todo o mundo. Passamos novamente neste momento a palavra à ministra do Desenvolvimento Social e Combate à Fome, Tereza Campelo.